راعيها حافظ عز بلادي والراية بيده يعليها.
Yeah, we'd like to welcome Arab Americans for Syria, Brother Johnny Achi, to give us an update. Welcome, Johnny. How are you doing?
Hello, Didan. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I've been noticing in terms of Western media, there's been this statement, especially in the New York Times, that the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria has refocused its military offensive from the government now to other so-called rebel groups, terrorist groups, to seize control of an independent section of northern Syria by the Turkey border to form their own state. Can you kind of elaborate upon this? Seems to be a new development.
Sure, Didan. Yesterday they've entered another part of Idlib, which is the bordering town by Turkey, and they went on executing 7 members of another Islamic factions, which they call themselves the Free Syrian Army. The public execution, there were hundreds of people watching, and the flag of Al-Qaeda everywhere, and they read an article by what they call the Islamic Sharia court for a public execution, and they're taking the northern part, which was occupied by the rebels, but they just want to turn it into what we call Imara, Islamic Imara, like they did in Raqqa, which is a province in Syria that is completely ruled by Islamic Sharia. These northern territories, they've been about a few months fighting over it between the Free Syrian Army and the ISIS, which is the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and with Nusra Front, another organization. So they're going at it, all of them, and the main reason is, the January 22nd has been set as the definite deadline or date for the meeting in Geneva. They want to try to improve their condition and say that we are the ruling on the ground, so you need to come and negotiate with us. So it's really a matter of a power struggle right now. Who will get to January 22nd and still in position of that? The more important battle, in my opinion, Didan, is what's taking place along the Lebanese border, however. That is much more important because it controls the highway that goes from Damascus to the northern Syria, where the oil comes from Homs. We need that oil to come down to the capital. The Kalamon Mountain, it's a long-awaited battle that we have, been waiting as in Syria, as Syrians. About 15 small towns alongside the whole Lebanese border, and the Syrian army had to eventually start that fight after the rebels took over a small town. What they call, they liberated Deir Atiyeh. Deir Atiyeh is a mostly Christian town, had not taken part in this fight like they did, a couple of months ago in another town named Sadat. Now, of course, the Syrian army carried out an operation and cleaned the town Deir Atiyeh from the mercenary terrorists, who were coming, of course, from all sides of the planet to democratize Syria. Let's remember, they want to democratize Syria. Now, another reason they attacked this town, these rebels, is to raise the morals left over of the terrorists, of course, who are losing one town after the other against the Syrian army. Now, let me tell you what they did in this town before the Syrian army liberated it. They called that they have liberated it. They killed every single medical crew in the Al-Basil National Hospital. They entered the hospital, killed the 5 doctors, 4 nurses, and 2 ambulance operators. They slaughtered them with knives, and they videotaped that. This is the kind of democracy that the West is backing up. And I do want to mention something about the U.S. media. I insist to mention this every single time. The U.S. media continue to fail to mention that the Syrian government has substantial support among the country's population. A lot of people think just the Christians and the Alawite and the Shiite and the Druze are supporting the Syrian government. The majority of the Sunni Muslims in Syria, Didan, and you know that fact, do support this government, okay? And despite this fact, some American academics and unfortunately some peace activists and some progressive leftists that I'm ashamed to call them leftists, with their heads in the sand, they're still lining up in support of these rebels, on the hope and dream that a military victory can bring these rebels into Syria. So the last thing the Syrians want to see is a radical Islamic takeover of the country. Okay, and many of these American supporters who are now relying on humanitarian reasons, and we know what they've done in Libya, taking or claiming a humanitarian, crisis, that's going to bring NATO, is going to bring the bombs, and you know what they're going to do. And Syria, Didan, over 50 churches has been burnt, and one of the oldest synagogue in the world, the Jober synagogue in Damascus, is probably the oldest. It's 2,000-year-old, the world's oldest synagogue. That's been burnt. Over 100 mosques of the Druze and Alawites and Shiites have been burnt. So we want to make sure that the U.S. left and the U.S. progressive they continue to support these rebels. These are Islamist terrorists, foreign jihadists being paid mercenaries. So, need to continue to remind them that they need to be on the side of justice and side of democracy and side of secular government, not Islamic terrorists.
Yeah, we have about maybe a couple of minutes left, but I noticed also that the Western media is now saying that a lot of the forces that had rallied against the partisan government is now supporting or backing off of supporting the rebels because they realize that, in fact, they're nothing but Islamic fundamentalists, many times financed by Saudi Arabia, that's trying to bring the Wahhabist form of Islam to Syria, which will roll back the role of women, the role of national minorities, roll back the role of other religious and other sub-Islamic sects. So it seems to be like the Western media, at least the New York Times, is now showing that it's a changing current in terms of those forces, secular forces that supported change through some of these rebel groups, like the Free Syrian Army and so forth, are now changing their position.
Yeah, exactly, Didan. It seems like somebody does not want a negotiated peace settlement in Syria. There's some forces out there, they have been ignoring the call for peace. And I remember in July of 2011, 2 months after the crisis began, the opposition used to name their Fridays. So this Friday they call it, no shame. The Friday, one Friday they call it no to dialogue. That was early July 2011. And since then, the Syrian government was saying, come to the table. At that time, remind you, there was only 300 people killed, and half of them were on security forces. So it was very low, death toll. The Syrian government said, come to the table, let's negotiate. There was an outside force. From that point on, no, insist on dropping the ball. No, we're not gonna accept anything but with Bashar Assad gone. I want to tell you what's gonna happen on January 22nd. This January 22nd, we're going to Geneva. The same people who have said for 2.5 years no to dialogue, they're forced today to go to dialogue after 100,000 persons being killed, after they destroyed the infrastructure of Syria. Why? Because the Americans told them you have to go. So these, what they call expatriate puppets who are, being paid by Qatar and Saudi Arabia, now they're forced to go with no condition. Remember, Bashar Assad is not going to resign. There is no promise that he will not rerun for the election. He's still that option still open. That was another condition they said. They wanted the security forces to be dismantled. That's not going to happen. They wanted, a government that will take executive presidential force. That's not going to happen. So nothing's going to happen. Everybody's going to go with no condition. They could have saved, a lot of lives and a lot of destruction of Syria had they accepted that negotiated settlement. So these belong to outside forces who want to see Syria destroyed. I hope the world can realize this today.
Okay, Johnny, we got to roll on, but thank you very much. This is Johnny Achi from Arab American Syria, a regular weekly contributor to Freedom Now to keep us updated on the crisis.